The conversation around Rowoon and Park Eun-bin didn't begin with a headline or a rumor. It began quietly, almost unintentionally, as fans started noticing how often their names appeared in the same conversations about talent, growth, and presence. Two actors walking very different paths, yet somehow arriving at the same spotlight at the same time. Rowoon's journey has always been about transformation. From his early days balancing idol life with acting to slowly shedding the label of idol actor, he worked his way into roles that demanded emotional depth and restraint. Each project showed a little more confidence, a little more clarity about who he wanted to be as an actor. He didn't rush the process. He let time do its work. Park Eun-bin's path, on the other hand, was built on quiet consistency. Years of experience, role after role, each one sharpening her ability to disappear into a character. She didn't chase trends. She built trust. By the time audiences truly took notice, she had already mastered the craft. Her performances didn't ask for attention. They held it. What made the buzz around them interesting in 2026 wasn't that they suddenly crossed paths, but that fans began imagining what would happen if they did. Discussions surfaced online comparing their acting styles, their interview philosophies, their shared preference for thoughtful storytelling over spectacle. Without a single joint appearance, a connection was forming in the minds of viewers. Industry watchers began to point out how similar their timing felt. Both were entering a phase of their careers where choices mattered more than exposure. Both were being associated with projects that emphasized character over hype. And both carried a reputation for professionalism that made them attractive collaborators in an industry that values reliability as much as talent. Fans revisited old interviews, noticing parallels. Rowoon speaking about wanting to be remembered for sincerity rather than popularity. Park Eun-bin talking about choosing roles that leave something behind, even after the drama ends. Those words, spoken separately, felt like they belonged in the same conversation. Social media did what it always does best. Edits appeared. Comparisons were made. Not in a shipping frenzy, but in a tone that felt more respectful, more curious. People weren't demanding a romance. They were wondering about chemistry, about balance, about what kind of story could be told if these two ever shared the same frame. What truly fueled the rising buzz was the absence of noise. No scandals, no forced marketing, no denial or confirmation of anything. Just two actors continuing to grow, quietly commanding attention simply by doing their work well. In an era where attention is often manufactured, that kind of organic interest felt refreshing. By mid-2026, their names were frequently mentioned together in fan polls, casting wish lists, and discussion threads about dream pairings rooted in acting strength rather than visual appeal alone. Viewers imagined scenes built on subtle tension, shared silence, and emotional restraint. The kind of storytelling that lingers instead of explodes. Whether or not Rowoon and Park Eun-bin ever share a project, the buzz surrounding them says something important. It reflects a shift in what audiences are craving. Less noise, more substance, less spectacle, more connection. From separate paths to a shared spotlight, their rising buzz isn't about what has happened. It's about potential. And sometimes, potential is powerful enough to keep people watching, waiting, and believing that the right story, at the right time, will eventually find its way to the screen. As the discussion continued to grow, something subtle but meaningful began to happen. Fans stopped asking if Rowoon and Park Eun-bin would ever work together and started asking when it would feel right. The curiosity matured. It wasn't fueled by impatience, but by respect for timing, for careers carefully shaped rather than rushed. Casting insiders began to quietly mention their names in the same breath, not as a gimmick, but as a possibility that made creative sense. Rowoon's calm, grounded presence paired with Park Eun-bin's emotional precision felt like a balance many scripts were missing. Not loud, not flashy, just honest. The kind of pairing that doesn't need constant dialogue to communicate meaning. What made this speculation different from typical fan-driven buzz was how it aligned with where both actors were headed. Rowoon was choosing roles that challenged his stillness, asking him to express more by doing less. Park Eun-bin continued to gravitate toward characters that demanded internal strength rather than dramatic excess. Their trajectories weren't converging by accident. They were narrowing naturally toward a similar storytelling space. Fans noticed how both actors handled attention. Neither chased virality. Neither leaned into controversy. Their interviews were thoughtful, often reflective, sometimes even reserved. That shared restraint became part of the appeal. People trusted them. And in an industry built on perception, trust is a rare currency. As conversations deepened, the tone shifted again. Discussions weren't just about visuals or chemistry. They were about narrative. Viewers imagined stories where emotion wasn't announced but revealed slowly, where conflict unfolded through choices, not shouting, where connection was built through understanding rather than coincidence. Some fans pointed out that if Rowoon and Park Eun-bin ever shared a project, it might not even be a romance in the traditional sense. It could be a partnership forged through adversity, a story of healing, of mutual respect, of two people standing side by side, facing something larger than themselves. And somehow, that idea felt even more compelling. The lack of any official collaboration only strengthened the anticipation. Without images or promotional material, imagination filled the gap. And imagination, when rooted in admiration rather than fantasy, tends to linger longer. Rowoon continued to refine his craft, each role adding another layer to his presence. Park Eun-bin continued to surprise, taking characters that resisted easy interpretation. Watching them separately, fans couldn't help but wonder how those layers might interact if ever placed together. By the latter half of 2026, their names had become shorthand for a certain type of quality. When people talked about dramas they wanted to feel rather than just watch, Rowoon and Park Eun-bin were often mentioned, not because they were trending constantly, but because they represented something steady in a fast-moving industry. And that is why their rising buzz feels different. It isn't driven by rumor. It isn't built on spectacle. It's sustained by possibility, by timing, and by a shared reputation for choosing substance over noise. Whether their paths ever fully intersect on screen remains to be seen. But the spotlight they now share, created by respect, curiosity, and quiet confidence, is already real. Sometimes, the most compelling stories aren't the ones that announce themselves loudly. They're the ones people wait for. As the year continued, the idea of Rowoon and Park Eun-bin sharing a spotlight stopped feeling like a distant wish and started feeling like an inevitability shaped by timing rather than pressure. The industry itself seemed to be moving toward the kind of storytelling both actors embodied, stories rooted in emotional truth, careful pacing, and characters that stayed with audiences long after the final scene. Observers began pointing out how both actors carried a similar emotional rhythm. Rowoon's strength lay in his ability to listen on screen, to let silence speak for him. Park Eun-bin, known for her expressive control, had mastered the art of conveying depth without excess. Put together, many felt their dynamic wouldn't compete for attention, but complement it. What also stood out was how both actors spoke about collaboration. In separate interviews, they emphasized the importance of trust between scene partners. Rowoon mentioned that his best performances came when he felt safe enough to be vulnerable. Park Eun-bin echoed a similar sentiment, saying that mutual respect on set allowed her to explore emotions more honestly. Those parallel views fueled even more discussion about what kind of environment they might create together. Fans began imagining not just scenes, but moments. A shared glance that says more than dialogue. A quiet disagreement resolved through understanding rather than conflict. A partnership built on equality. These weren't fantasies born from obsession, but thoughtful projections based on how both actors had approached their past work. Interestingly, the absence of official confirmation never dampened interest. If anything, it preserved it. Without marketing campaigns or staged appearances, the conversation remained organic. It was driven by appreciation rather than anticipation alone. Meanwhile, both Rowoon and Park Eun-bin continued to take roles that deepened their credibility. Each new project added to the sense that they were preparing, knowingly or not, for something larger. Something that required experience, patience, and confidence in restraint. By now, the phrase shared spotlight felt accurate not because they stood together physically, but because they occupied the same space in the audience's mind. A space reserved for actors who elevate stories simply by being part of them. Whether that space eventually brings them together in a single frame or not, the buzz surrounding Rowoon and Park Eun-bin reflects a broader shift. Viewers are no longer just chasing excitement. They're seeking meaning. And in that search, these two actors stand out as symbols of where storytelling might be heading next. Their paths may have started separately, but the spotlight they shared today was earned through consistency, intention, and a quiet refusal to rush what matters. And sometimes that's enough to keep people watching, wondering, and believing that when the right story arrives, they'll be ready to tell it, together or apart.